Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Or maybe this is your first time. Today we are going to be talking about something that I've talked about a lot on this channel, but I haven't done a dedicated video about it. All these points are probably points that you have heard before, but we're just going to make a dedicated video and we are going to have new information. And this is all going to actually be about the second to the last page, I believe it is, which is the page everyone has a problem with, which is the page of parody being destroyed. People seem to have an issue with that, right? And I'm going to explain how this does not ruin the story and how this coincides with Aaron's goals. And for those of you who've seen my Aaron's goals videos on YouTube or any other video, you probably have heard these points brought up over and over and over again. But again, I'm gonna make a specific video about it. If you're mad, just call it re-upload. Okay. So number one, the first thing that I would like to mention, and this time I brought my receipts. So the first thing that I would like to mention is a real-world example right now. Okay, so let's go into a real-world example. So this is a map, and it's a map of all the ongoing conflicts, armed conflicts that are going on right now. Now, if you look closely, you can see South Korea is there. You can see India is there. Mexico's there. These aren't armed conflicts in a traditional sense. They aren't like actually invading each other and fighting. But they are having significant military escapades. Like Mexico's fighting the drug cartels as an example. And as you can see, Africa is just engulfed in what is mostly civil wars. And actually, the Congo is now, by some people's standards, in its third civil war. Okay, its third civil war, which we'll actually talk about right now. So when the first civil war ended, right? I think in the 90s or 80s, right? If it was a story, it would have been like, oh, great, we ended the Civil War and now we live happily ever after, right? But no, it's the real world and there's two more wars or an ongoing war still happening. As you can see, the Middle East is in conflict. India and Pakistan are in conflict. Again, not like a traditional, like, you know, Ukraine-Russia thing or Israel-Palestine armed conflict, but it is very high tension. There's a lot of military escapades going on there. So that is just the first example I have. It's a real-world example that all these countries were at one time at peace and now they're at war, right? For example, Mexico, which has been fighting for wars for a long time. The Mayans and Incans fought in wars. Then the conquistadors fought. That was a war, right? Then when the conquistadors came, and they had, you know what land they had. They had going all the way up to Texas and California. They had all this land, and then there was a civil war in Mexico, which then created Texas independence, right? And then there was another war, the Spanish-American War, Mexican-American War, right? So, you know, if you're writing a story, or if it was a story from a Mexican point of view, you'd be like, oh, great. The war is over, and be like, okay, everyone live happy ever after. But now they're fighting the drug cartels because the cycle of violence never, ever ends. Okay, so that's just one of my first examples here. So I show that map to you to show that in the real world there's no happy endings and armed conflicts are always happening. And I said this in the video that got deleted. I said, peace is only a brief respite between wars. War is the norm, and peace is a brief respite between said wars. And usually to establish peace, you have to kill a lot of innocent people. I would like to ask you guys, there's a term, pax and then something, right? So I think Pax Romus was, you know, general peace and well-being in and around the Roman time and area. Pax Britannia, same thing. Pax Americana, currently, right now. But what do all these things have in common? All these things, all these countries and areas that have a lot of peace in them, around them, usually have to engage in bloody and destructive conflicts that end up hurting a lot of innocent people. Okay? And of course, if you're talking about, you know, Rome was at the height of its power, right? Very peaceful. In Rome, no one could touch Rome, and then, you know, they got the crap kicked out of them in World War I. And speaking of World War I, It was called the War to End All Wars. So I think Wonder Woman was actually set in World War One. So when Wonder Woman ended, I was like, this is sort of weird how it ended like this almost happy ending. I mean, she did defeat the God of War, I guess, but in real life, World War One was not the war to end all wars. World War One was a warm up, and it really was a warm up. Because the next World War was going to be so much more devastating and take much more lives and be much more destructive, and be much more impactful. Right, the First World War didn't really have as much of an impact as the Second World War did as far as geopolitics go. But they called it the war to end all wars. And if you're writing a movie about it and it's writing a story, and the Allies like, yeah, we have peace, everything's good now. All right, we're done. Everyone's happy ever after. But just because World War One ended, or the Allies ended World War One, does not mean they did everything in vain. Okay, fighting for peace is still a noble cause, and it's still a good thing to push for, even if it's not going to last forever. And no one is under delusion it's going to last forever. And speaking of no one being under delusion it's going to last forever, let's take a look at our good friend Eren Yeager. So, I actually can't read this right now. You can read it, but basically it's Eren talking to Pixis, and this is in season 1. He's talking to Dot Pixis. Actually, I can read it. So, I would have to be looking away, though. Sorry about that. So, it says, we're told before the Titans took the land, human beings were constantly murdering each other over tribal disputes and ideologies. Sound familiar? Right now, he's foreshadowing. This thing about foreshadowing this because tribal disputes is foreshadowing old Eldia, 2,000-year-old Eldia. Ideologies is well, I mean, pretty much every war, including, wars now. What's containment? The containment policy. Vietnam, South Korea, all those containment policy play into all of those. What is containment policy? But ideologies, right? We don't like communism, so we're going to go to war to stop communism. Whether it's bad or good, I'm not going to comment on right now. This is not a political channel, but I'm just saying this is reflective of the real world, which is very important for stories. And on top of being reflective of the real world, it is also foreshadowing what happens later on in the story. Then he says, back then, someone supposedly said, if a powerful non-human enemy appeared, humanity would probably unite and stop fighting itself. Now, this is a really, really cool line from Dot Pixis, because this line not only, this is a very, very layered line, and it's going to take a little while to unpack, but he's talking about he's talking about two things. He's talking about the current state and he's talking about the present state. So, in the current state, they are stopping to unite, right? The Civic Corps, right, they don't have all the same ideologies, they don't have all the same beliefs, they probably don't even like each other, most of them. I mean, there probably is a good brotherly bond fighting together, but there might be something that they disagree with, and if they stop fighting, they would find massive disagreements and strife. But they put all that aside to unite as one unit to fight against the Titans under the leadership of Commander Erwin. But it's also referring to Eren himself, which is the Attack Titan, right? Which is why the show is called Attack on Titan, because when they're attacking Titans, right, they're uniting against one common enemy. Then they're uniting against the Attack Titan, definite article, because Eren is the one attacking, the most powerful one. So it's the Attack Titan. So if let's say, for example, that's too complicated an analogy, but he's the Attack Titan, right? And they're all uniting against him. So this is a very, very interesting line by Dot Pixis here. So uniting everyone to attack Eren. But again, notice what Eren says here, and I'm sorry, I think my thing is in the way. I'm going to take my camera off for a little bit. Now, notice what Eren says here. He says, I never heard that legend, but I think it's pretty rosy. Frankly, it's dull. Okay, now, I'm going to put my camera back on, actually, because... Anyway, so he says it's quite dull. He says it's rosy. Now, there's a couple things about this. Number one, he's right. Because, again, in this very world, he says, even now, when that powerful enemy is backed us into a corner, I think we're far from united. Okay, so he's right. People are angry about paying taxes for useless missions. The military police is corrupt. The government is secretly and also not secretly corrupt. So he's right about this. And in the future, he's also right because we have different factions. We have the Jaegers coming up, which is a giant political movement that is running contrary to humanity's uniting goals. So they're simultaneously united and not united at the same time. This is a very, very good line. Very, very good stuff here. So, but the main thing, and don't get too caught up in this, the main thing I want to say is that Eren, in his naive self, because he's more naive and he's less wise in this panel, because this is season 1. Remember, this is a trust arc. Look at the arc. This is season 1. He is saying that even in this naive state, he still doesn't think humanity would be able to get their shit together, excuse my French, and be at peace. Okay? He says it's rosy. Okay. So, that is another thing. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is this, which is done by Pixis again. So, it's this line. And it says, I've brought this up a million times. I just want to bring up the main manga panels just so I have extra, receipts. I just have the real source. It's right here, and it says, of course, Commander Emery says, humanity will never stop fighting until it shrinks to the size of one or fewer. Or my translation says one or less. Humanity will stop fighting until the population is down to one or less. That's what my translation says. And this, now I bring up the Eren. This is why I brought up Eren first, because Eren himself, the person who's doing the rumbling, the person who has the actual plan, knows what it's going to happen. But I bring up Commander Eren because Commander Eren is foreshadowing the ending. He's saying, guys, don't get it confused. Humanity is going to fight until the population. Isayama's saying this through Commander Eren via foreshadowing that humanity is going to stop fighting until the population is down to one or less. He's saying this so that your headcanon doesn't grow too big, so that when you do this, Parody gets destroyed. And believe me, he did plan to have that panel in there. So when Parody does get destroyed, you're not disappointed because he's just hammering this into you. Okay, now the next thing is this, which is from, hold on here. This is from 139 itself. Okay, so it says, I'm actually going to try to focus on the end here. When Armin says, hold on, let me get my camera out of the way so that you guys can see what it says. Okay, it says, Annie was saying that they were weak for not being able to, before that she said that they were weak. Oh, actually, it's right here. Hold on a second, just gotta get my camera out of the way. Okay, it says in our weakness, or in our weakened state that might just, she tears off. And then, in my translation, she says, us weaklings, pretty much along the same lines. And then Armin says in 139.1, he says, any conflict between people will never end. Okay? This is in, 139.1, according to you guys. Because that was the first, you call it 8 extra pages, 139.5. This is 139.1, right? And Armin is saying that conflict will not stop between people ever. Okay, so he's saying this again to this is a massive theme. I was talking about my themes video. The cycle of violence is a massive theme, and Isayama knows this is unavoidable, and that's why he puts this line in here, because it's true, and because he does not want you to get your headcanon too big to where you think, oh, it's going to be a fairy tale ending, everything's going to be fine. You're wrong. But also, notice how he doesn't just leave it like that. Notice how he says, but if they see us all together like this, everyone will surely want to know, what happened. Then he tells them the story, and it's theorized that he's a narrator because he's telling the Marlians, the Jaegerists, their entire story, so that, they can live in peace on the island. Okay, so, again, this is the same exact theme that we've been looking at. Again, we've looked at since the Trost arc back in Volume 4, 2013. Now we're talking about, now we went to Season 3, And now we're in season 4, part 3. So stuff that isn't even animated yet, okay? So this has been a constant thing that's been hammered through over and over and over again. But notice how Armin says this, because this is still hope. Because he still feels like it's worth fighting for. It's still worth fighting for peace, even if it's not going to last for a long time. That's what Armin is trying to say. Now, another thing, and this is going to be a really quick video, guys, but another thing that I would like to bring up is one of my favorite lines in the entire show, which is Colt's line. This is I don't know what this is, chapter 124. Okay, and Gabby's talking about how she's a devil, right? And then she makes this mistake because she's pretty much doing the Carl Fritz thing, right? Some people, right, like Magath and Tiber, just accept their devilness. Say, yeah, we're evil people, and then they, like they shook hands in that carriage, and they know what they're doing is evil, but they're still going to do it anyway, which is harmful, obviously, to civilization and humanity, because it perpetuates psycho violence. But then Gabi has this Carl Fritz complex, where she's like, I'm so evil, I'm the devil, and she's gonna go on this whole guilt thing. But then, Colt stops it. Colt stops it right here, where he says, that the devil is inside. And again, I searched very, very hard to find this exact translation. This is the official translation, number one, and number two, this is the best translation. He says he's inside me too, referring to the devil, and in you, Kaya, and in everyone. Okay, so we see Colt as this noble guy who, even he's gonna go on to sacrifice. Or this is actually after. This might be a flashback, actually. Point being, after he says this, he ends up sacrificing his own life for his brother. Again, I wasn't a big fan of that scene. I'm not gonna explain why, but he does something noble, right? So, and he's not looked upon as a bad guy. He's, to my knowledge, he hasn't really killed any innocent people, or maybe he did, but he's not looked upon as a bad guy. No one described Colt as a bad guy, but he says it's inside of him too. We all love to hate Gabby, but Colt, of course not. Then he says Kaya, and he's not actually referring to her wanting to kill Gabby, although that is part of it. And then he goes on to say, and in everyone, the devil's inside us all, and that's why the world turned out this way. And there's nothing else to say after that. There's nothing else to say after that. He's completely right. Okay? That is exactly why. What he's basically, as I said in my previous videos, he's reiterating the doctrine of original sin. And he says, that's why the world turned out this way. Yeah, that's why the world turned out this way. Because when you have sinful creatures, when you have the devil inside them, what's going to happen? Evil's going to happen on both sides. There's no victim, there's no good guy, there's no bad guy. Right? They're all just people with the devil inside them, and the world's going to turn out this way. But if you're saying, well, why fight for peace then? Why would you do anything for peace? For domestic peace, or for national peace, or even for international peace? Why should I do any of that? Should I stop giving money to people? Should I stop trying to go into conflict zones? Should I stop talking on the news about how we should stop war? Is it really a futile attempt? But of course he doesn't have, the whole, post-millennialism to fall back on, or the coming of Christ or anything like that. But what he does have is something that is still valid, although not as valid as those things. And he says this, which is a wonderful line. And again, it reiterates what Armin says. And as I said so many times, actually, I'm going to get my camera out of the way for a little bit, because you guys can't see. Don't worry, I'll plan this better next time. Alright, so he says, then what should we do? She says this directly after, okay? Again, I split this, I cut up this panel because I wanted to tell you guys this individually, but she says, what should we do then? Because if the world is so effed up, and we're like this, and the devil inside all of us, and we can't escape it, then what should we do? And then he says, we will leave the forest. Even if we can't leave, we will continue to try. Now, while this in of itself is not a valid point, because it makes absolutely no sense in a vacuum, but if you've read Children of the Forest, it does makes sense, and if of course if the whole owl thing comes into perspective about loving people inside the walls, and then that's how you're able to break the cycle of violence, or help break the cycle of violence. And then of course you combine that with the meta narrative, which is to have perspective and to walk in someone else's shoes. That's another massive theme I forgot to add. If you walk into someone else's shoes, that will also stop the cycle of violence. But that's a meta narrative. But he says we will continue to try. Now, not only is that a good advice, coupled with what we see with the owl and what we see with Sasha's father, this is also, again, all referring to Eren. He wants his friends to leave the forest, and if he can't, he will still try. Remember, it said he will sacrifice anything to protect her, okay? Remember this. So, let's go back to the camera now. So, this is why the last pages do not ruin the ending. Again, had you had the ending you wanted, you would have sacrificed the story's themes for cheap satisfaction. That's not what the story was about. It was never about happy endings. It was never about unrealistic crap. It was about the cycle of violence, about hate, it was about original sin, and it was about love, okay? And Eren loved Mikasa, and he loved his friends, and he wanted to buy them. He knew it was too idealistic, especially after he saw the basement and saw, hey, we're the bad guys. Because again, when they see the basement, he thinks, oh, we're the good guys. He sees the basement, he says, oh, crap. We, I can't say the word here because it gets monetized, but we did forcible things to women to expand our empire, and we killed a bunch of people to expand our empire, and we stole a bunch of people's land. We read this, he's like, that's us. We're the bad guys. We use Titans to terrorize people. We are evil. And then he reads about the Marleyans. So he knows, even after he goes to the basement, he gets a deeper understanding of how human beings work and how peace will never be worldwide peace will never be achieved. Because everyone has to be on board with the whole leaving the forest thing, and everyone has to love everybody. But which is why he says love your neighbor. Jesus, I'm talking about Jesus. What was I saying? Yeah. So, but he knew I can buy 80 years of peace and freedom, long happy lives. The whole rumbling nonsense, too risky. He didn't see in the future, and it's not freedom. I could give Mikasa and Armin complete freedom, long, happy lives, and it will be great. It will be maybe 80, 90 years of freedom and peace and prosperity, and we see with the extra pages, that's exactly what we get. Armin and Mikasa all live long, happy lives, okay? And again, as I said, they have economic freedom, they have actual, freedom of movement, that no one touches them, they have peace, they're completely fine. And it only makes sense for Perry to get destroyed after. And I'm so glad he put that in there. Because again, you might be saying, well, Beluga, listen, it's a running theme, but he didn't need to put it in there. He didn't put it in there because he needed to make damn well sure that you knew, and he needed to canonize it, that the cycle of violence still repeated. But just like Armin in 137, found happiness in little fleeting moments of joy, of unfiltered, unadulterated joy. We found happiness in those things. That's exactly how it works in a broader context. They were able, his friends, especially Mikasa, were able to find happiness, peace, and freedom within a fleeting era that was going to come to an end soon, or maybe not. Maybe have it 1,000 years after. Who knows? That came to an end soon. And as the last point, people might say that this is morally attacking them back. This is morally getting back at the Eldians. That's BS because Aliens are hard to invade, and their military technology was well behind the Eldians. B, their military technology was well behind the Eldians. C, they have oil. I don't think I need to say anything more. They had oil, so that's inviting a war. And then B, I don't think it fits the theme of the stories, because again, I think it's a civil war. But that's just my opinion. But that's not Marley. He never said it was Marley. He never said it. He never said it was Marley, number one. He never said why they were there. Even if it was Marley, he never said why it was there. And it's all done purposefully. And at least I think it's done purposely, because, as I said before, any reason to why this war started would give credence to the thought process that if said thing didn't happen, then the war wouldn't happen. And that's not the point Yasiel was trying to make. And apparently he's right in making that assumption about the audience, because the audience is still messed up and twisted about Parody being destroyed when they should have expected this for a long time, since chapter 20 or whatnot. But anyway, so that is the video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you in my next video.